Hey everyone, welcome to another match of Temur Warp Midrange. Today we are playing Soulherder, which is an interesting deck to play against. They're kind of abusing the blink effects of their own creatures. Our opening hand was bad, so we had to mulligan. This hand is... it's not great, but it's not so bad that we need to mulligan it again, and I think 6 is just fine. I wasn't sure what I was playing against yet, so it was a safe enough keep. We have some removal, we have some ramp, we have some threats, relatively balanced. So we're going to start off with a lightning bolt, because you always bolt the bird. So we know that our opponent is playing Mystic Sanctuary, so the graveyard is important to them. We, of course, also hate Mystic Sanctuary, right? We draw a second Tarmogoyf, which is actually great. We won't be able to cast it next turn, though, because we kind of have to set up the green. I think at this point I would value Utopia Sprawl over a threat. So we can't do much here. We're going to have to wait. So Coiling Oracle comes down. And we find out that our opponent also is playing a Time Warp, so it's going to be interesting. So we draw Misty Rainforest. This is going to be kind of cool. So we play our second Tarmogoyf, and they play their ice-fang Coatl. Alright. So it almost seems like we're playing against a Simic deck, but odds are they're also playing white. Of course, we know that they're playing Soulherder, so they are most definitely playing white. There you go. So we have Time Warp in hand, which is going to be great. So, alright. Path to Exile is inadvertently going to ramp us. We can't cast Time Warp this turn. But we do draw a second Time Warp, which is going to be hilarious. So I'm looking forward to playing that. So we attack in. Our opponent doesn't really have anything worth blocking. Alright, Metal Drifter. That's an interesting card to play. But you do draw... I mean, I'm assuming they're trying to use the Evoke there, but... it's kind of a funny card to see. Of course, it's there to be abused by Soulherder, right? So drawing 2 cards, drawing 4 cards potentially in that turn because of that one creature is kind of intense. We draw a land, and we draw another Utopia Sprawl, which is just fantastic. We are almost certainly going to Time Warp our opponent this turn. My guess is we pay 2 life for Stomping Ground, add Utopia Sprawl to our existing forest, and then we go all Time Warp happy. Alright, so we choose green. So our forest now produces green, blue, green. And we cast our first Time Warp. Alright, so we get our first free turn. We draw an Arbor Elf. Kind of overkill at this point, but let's attack in. And now you will see the power of Time Warp. So we didn't even do anything with our Planeswalkers here. We just decided to, hey, let's just take 3 turns in a row. And our opponent dies. So there we go. We won game 1. We scared our opponent. I'm sure our opponent is not happy with that result. So I think Blood Moon makes sense here. Our opponent is playing kind of a greedy mana base, and locking them out and making them just produce a bunch of red is going to, you know, kill a lot of their spells. So I think Blood Moon makes sense. We're still not sure what our opponent is playing exactly. I mean, I wasn't sure at the time, since it is kind of a spicy deck. So what do we bring in? Disdainful Stroke. We did see some big spells there, so might make sense to bring in Disdainful Stroke. And since we are bringing in... and here we go. Alright. So Our opening hand is meh. Yeah, it's meh. If we had a red source or a Utopia Sprawl, that would have been keepable. But no. So this second hand is also bad. And now we have to go down to 5. So this is not ideal, right? We have no choice but to keep this. This is just a god-awful hand. Just god-awful. But can't do much here. So birds come down again. This time we do not have a bolt. We'll just put down our own version of bird. I suppose Arbor Elf is a decent draw. But right now we're just very much behind. Eternal Witness comes down. They're going to get their land. Blah, blah, blah. So we draw Time Warp, which is cool. Not something we're going to be casting anytime soon, but now the decision is, do we cast Tarmogoyf? We don't really have major threats we're facing down, so I'd almost rather wait and cast ice-fang Quaddle next turn. Well, at the end of our opponent's turn, at least. So Soulherder finally comes down. Okay, now the fun starts. At least for our opponent. Where they get to abuse enter the battlefield effects. And of course pump their creatures with +1/+1 counters. Not exactly what I like to face down in a game where I mulligan to 5. So Soulherder has its end step effect. Eternal Witness is going to get blinked. They're going to bring back their Misty Rainforest. And everyone is happy. Well, no, that's not true. I'm not happy. Let's see what ice-fang gets us. Another land would be useful. Instead we get another Time Warp, which is funny, but... Alright, so we get our third land. We only produce 4 mana at this point. Yeah, Tamiyo is not safe to bring down yet. So Tarmogoyf is really our only option here. And again, we're really behind. Mulliganing to 5 was just brutal. And our 5 that we kept was really anemic. So, it is what it is. Our opponent's just going off here. They are doing great. We are not. Luckily, we see that they are actually fetching pretty conservatively. So Blood Moon, probably going to come out for game 3. I guess that's a spoiler alert, because now you know there's a game 3. But, I mean, just by the way this game is going, you know that there would have to be a game 3. And now Soulherder is going to do its thing. Yeah, there's just really no way out of here. Utopia Sprawl comes down, which means we can play Time Warp this turn. But then the question really is, what are we doing here? So our opponent has a much better board state. We have a very small Tarmogoyf. And we were basically just going to pray we draw into something that helps us stabilize. But realistically speaking, I don't see what we can draw into right now. But it's worth a shot. We need to go through the motions. So we draw Blood Moon, which is a dead card. So not great. We can cast Tamiyo and pray that it survives, because if Tamiyo survives, we can start abusing Time Warp. There we go. Finally figured out how to cast Tamiyo. So now it's on the battlefield. We'll do the +1 ability. We'll name probably Time Warp. But I might actually name Tarmogoyf here because I kind of want a Tarmogoyf. Yeah. So it doesn't necessarily matter what we name. I mean, ideally we hit the card that we name. Ironically, if we hit if I had Time Warp that turn, I would have drawn 2 Time Warps. But okay. All right, that's so Ephemerate is going to be cast now, which is just not what we want to see, especially with the rebound effect. Yeah. Yeah, it's more blinking abuse, and we're just way too behind. Now, actually, if we had survived one more turn, we may have been able to get about 3 or 4 consecutive turns, but it's just not going to be enough at this point. Yeah, and the Knight is just going to be brutal as well. So it's really unfortunate that we had to start on 5 lands. On 5 cards. Really, really is unfortunate. I think that's what tilted this game in our opponent's favor, because it was just a bad 5. I don't think we would have been able to get a good 4. I don't think there's no such thing as a good 4 in this deck. So yeah, just a 5/5 is brutal at this point. We can block it, but now I learn an unfortunate lesson. That Ephemerate can still be cast at instant speed. And now what's going to happen is Soulherder is going to get blinked out. Sorry, not Soulherder, but another creature, Coiling Oracle, is going to get blinked out, and Soulherder is going to get a +1/+1. So they're going to kill our Tarmogoyf, and at that point, I'm almost certainly conceding. Because now we have no threats anyway, even if I was able to string several Time Warps together. I think it's game, and I think it would be safe to say it's time to concede. But I think I'm just sticking to it for now, just for science, just to learn what exactly our opponent is doing, so we're prepared for game 3. And we draw Tarmogoyf, but it's just not enough. All right, so game 3 it is. Blood Moon, goodbye. Anger of the Gods actually makes a little bit more sense here. Our opponent didn't really abuse the graveyard that much. A Braid I'm bringing in, obviously not for artifact hate, but for further creature hate. Because it seems we need to handle their creatures as quickly as possible. So our starting hand again is pretty bad. This hand is keepable, yeah. Not great, but not something I think is worth being thrown away. Especially on a game 3 again, I'd rather keep a subpar 6 than a subpar 5. So our opponent has a slow start. Interesting. We draw ice-fang, and we're going to rush our Renin 6 onto the battlefield, which I think is a smart move. I could have attacked in there, and I didn't, but that's okay. So Renin 6 getting back that land is going to mean that our Tarmogoyf is going to be a bit small for the time being, but it's a small price to pay. We are still going to +1 and get that land back. We'll most likely cast ice-fang Quaddle this turn. So our opponent's going to fetch for an island. Play another land. And we are going to cast our ice-fang Quaddle. Well, one of the two. We draw an Arbor Elf, and we draw a Time Warp, so that's pretty good. So we are on our way to Renin 6 maxing out. Ultimating with its -7. But for now, we're going to take it easy. attacking is safe because there's really no major threat here. Fetch for an island. And here I'm contemplating, do I want to play Time Warp? And it looks like I do. I don't think this is a bad plan. So we're going to up our rend to 6. We're going to get a free turn. We're going to up our rend to 7 next. And then the turn after this one, we are going to ultimate Ren. And at that point, we can start discarding lands from our hand to cast Time Warp from our graveyard. And that's essentially a soft lock. And you'll see what I mean here. So Arbor Elf comes down. We will ultimate. Sorry. I keep saying ultimate because I really want to get to the ultimate of Ren here. But we are going to +1 Ren again. And unless our opponent does something insane this turn, we are going to start getting a lot of free turns. So watch this. So our opponent plays Wall of Omens, which, okay. And they are going to play their Forest, sure. What are they going to try and get onto the battlefield? Knight of Autumn. So they're going to gain 4 life. And they're going to attack Ren. Of course, we are going to cast our ice-fang Quaddle. And we draw Euro, by the way, which is, it's just beautiful. It's just beautiful. This is what I live for. So here we go. Let's watch the magic happen. I'm almost certain it's going to be happening this turn. So I can choose to kill Ren now. And get the ultimate. So let's see what I do here. So if I get the ultimate, I can start discarding lands from my hand and getting free turns with Time Warp. There we go. So retrace is now a thing. So let's start having fun with free turns. First, I need to get more mana. I'm short 1. So the best thing we can do here is use our 2 Arbor Elves and untap our Forest and get our mana. And we will cast Time Warp and retrace. Sure. Discard that land. We're good. And now we attack in for 4. Our opponent will potentially block. No blocks. Great. Just what I wanted to see. We draw another land. Beautiful. So, what do we want to do this turn, you say? Well, we have a bunch of mana available, so we can do Time Warp. Of course, it's safe to do Time Warp right now. But beautifully, we could also cast Euro. So, let's cast Euro. Well, first let's attack. I mean, let's just go through emotions. Attack with our 4/5 Tarmogoyf. Of course, it's going to get blocked because our opponent's at 9 life. And now for our second main phase, let's cast Euro. Why not? We already have another extra turn coming, and you know what that means, right? We get to escape Euro this turn, go right to our next turn, and attack in. And it's a beautiful sight to see. This is exactly the type of gameplay you are trying to accomplish. So it looks like I didn't have enough for Euro there, so I didn't. So I was getting a bit cocky. But that's okay, because we still have a land in our hand. we can still pull it off. I mean, in theory, we don't even need Euro right now. Our opponent's going to be forced to block. They're down to 7. So we cast our Time Warp yet again. Yeah, let's get that sequencing right there. So I think I missed my Euro cast there, unfortunately. Lucky for me, I got 2 bolts. So this is a bit embarrassing, but we still managed to win, even though yours truly almost effed that up. At this point, I'm casting Euro just to be safe, but there's really no point because we have double bolt. So just ignore the fact that I'm an idiot for a second, and realize that if I had cast Euro last turn, which I had all the mana available to me, I would have won. So there we go. We won the match, even though it was in the hands of an incompetent pilot. But that being said, what you saw in Game 3 is basically what you're trying to accomplish. And we didn't need Tamiyo for it, right? In this case, Ren and 6 did all the work for us. We ultimate, we did the -7. All of a sudden, Time Warp has Retrace. We start discarding lands from our hand, and it's a beautiful sight. Now, ideally, Ren goes up to 8 first before you go to its -7, right? In which case, there you have essentially an infinite loop. Assuming your opponent doesn't do anything, you go up to 8, and then next turn, you go down to 1, you ultimate, you get your Time Warp ability, you have a land in your hand, you retrace, discard that land, you get a free turn. Next turn starts, you +1 your Ren, return the land, discard it, cast your Time Warp, start next turn, Ren, so on and so forth, and then you're essentially infinite turns. Your opponent can't get out unless they kill your Ren or they counter your Time Warp. Even then, if you're drawing more cards, odds are you're drawing at least other lands. You can keep doing it over and over and over. So Ren allows you to do the infinite loop. Tamiyo, if you did have Tamiyo, you can't necessarily have an infinite loop, but you could if you had enough Time Warps in hand and graveyard at the same time. Because then you could always do Time Warp, up Tamiyo for a couple of turns, and then do -3, get Time Warp into your hand, keep going, and as long as you keep feeding your Time Warps, you're good. But Ren and 6 obviously makes things a lot easier if you can get it to do its ultimate. So I hope you enjoyed that match. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up. If you enjoy my content in general, please subscribe, hit that notification bell. It really, really helps me out. I really appreciate it. You guys so far have been great. Really, really great. And of course, follow me on Twitter. I try and keep it up to date pretty often. Thanks, and have a good one.